Okay, there we go. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Garrett. I'm the Executive Director of Can Connect 19. Thank you all for joining us this evening. For those who may be new to Can Connect 19, we're a Canadian peer-led support network for individuals living with long COVID and COVID vaccine injury. Our mission is to provide a safe, supportive community where people feel seen, heard, and helped through connection, education, and shared experience. One of the ways we do that is by bringing together knowledgeable speakers from a wide range of disciplines to explore topics that support health, resilience, and overall well-being. While many of our presentations focus on specific health conditions or treatment approaches, we also believe it's important to step back and consider the broader picture of what it means to heal and thrive. So tonight's presentation does exactly that. We're pleased to welcome Suzanne and Kevin Schildroth, who will be presenting The Resilient Human, Exploring Health, Consciousness, and the Pursuit of Optimal Well-Being. So a little background about our speakers tonight. Suzanne is the founder of Quantum Nature Therapy, and she's a holistic health practitioner. Suzanne holds a bachelor degree in holistic health science from Quantum University and is currently completing her master's degree in natural medicine. Her work explores the fascinating intersection of science, consciousness, and whole person health, with a focus on helping people better understand resilience across the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions of well-being. Kevin brings more than 4 decades of leadership, business development, and mentoring experience. He's currently completing his exponential health coach certification, also through Quantum University, and has developed a deep passion for helping others better understand resilience, the mind-body connection, and practical ways to live healthier, more intentional lives. So together, Suzanne and Kevin bring a unique blend of education, lived experience, and thoughtful exploration. This evening, they'll guide us through topics including stress and adaptation, the five bodies of consciousness, the relationship between matter, energy, and human experience, and practical tools that can help build resilience in everyday life. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome Suzanne and Kevin Schildroth. Suzanne and Kevin, thank you for being here tonight, and the digital floor is yours. I think you guys are still muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, no,
Perfect.
good.
And can you guys see the presentation properly?
Yes,
Yes.
we.
Okay, great. Just want to confirm that. Okay. Okay. Just 1 second. Okay. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you, Garrett and Wendy, for having us here today. This talk is quite ambitious because in many ways we are attempting to summarize in only minutes concepts about the nature of reality and what we have learned about how the universe functions. It requires an open mind to contemplate what we have been taught and currently believe to be true, and asks you to leave space for a change in awareness that allows us to see something new that could be possible. I understand that members in this group have come together in unity to learn about new health concepts, and for many, to specifically address symptoms of long COVID or possible vaccine injury. Much of the hurt we have experienced is mental and emotionally based. We often forget that this as we focus on physical issues with our bodies and neglect to recognize and heal the damage done to our health in these areas. With this possibility of facing the effects of vaccine injury comes feelings of betrayal, anger, and outrage at being irresponsibly or purposefully coerced, abused, and mistreated, lied to, taken advantage of, and manipulated by the medical system and or the government. Before we continue, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment them, but we'll be able to answering those at the very end of the presentation. Okay, so this brings us to today's journey, asking ourselves these specific questions. Why do we experience life differently? What shapes our perception? How are the mind and body connected? How do we change how we react? And how do we become a resilient human? So logically, we ask ourselves this question: what makes people experience the same situation so differently? To answer this, we need to discuss the nature of reality.
Classical mechanics essentially view people as material machines. From this viewpoint, if we're only machines, we leave no room for conscious experience. So if reality is concrete, then we will likely feel there's nothing we can do to change or control it. And in essence, we're powerless or perhaps even victims to circumstance. Quantum mechanics suggests that conscious experience is based on all possibilities existing simultaneously in a field of potentiality and only collapses into reality through conscious awareness. So if reality is a field of possibility, then what we believe can affect our experience. Then we get to ask ourselves, what can I do to make it different? How can I make it happier? How can I make it healthier? Within the consciousness-based model, consciousness is viewed as the foundation from which reality emerges. Rather than seeing consciousness as something produced by the brain, this perspective suggests that consciousness is primary and that our physical reality arises from it. In this model, consciousness is described as a field of infinite potential, a vibrational field containing countless possibilities. Through awareness, intentions, and choices, we continually participate in which possibilities become our lived experience.
Okay, I want to use Schrodinger's cat, an example of what we're discussing as quantum physics. Most people have probably heard of the thought experiment done by Erwin Schrödinger, a theoretical physicist. Imagine a sealed box containing a cat along with a mechanism that releases poison. The mechanism may release, but if it doesn't, the cat will remain alive. According to classical physics, before the box is opened, the cat exists as either alive or dead, whereas quantum physics suggests that the cat exists both alive and dead simultaneously. At the quantum level, the mathematics of the theory can describe multiple outcomes before a measurement is made. Once that measurement occurs, we observe one definite outcome. This offers a useful way to reflect on the difference between what happens and what we experience. Every day, we're presented with many possible interpretations of the events in our lives. Which interpretation becomes our lived reality is influenced by our perception, our beliefs, our environment, our relationships, and again, our lived experience. If consciousness is viewed as the foundation of reality, then how is that consciousness expressed within a living human being? One holistic answer would be the concept of the biofield. The biofield is a network of energetic communication that organizes molecular, chemical, organic, and neurophysiological processes. Think of it like a computer network. Information isn't carried by the computer itself, but it flows through the fiber optic cables that connect the entire network. The biofield is the same. It's the informational network that coordinates communication throughout the whole person. Those pieces of information are carried by little packets of light called a biophoton. Although the term biofield is modern, the idea itself is quite ancient. Traditional Chinese medicine describes it as qi, Ayurveda describes it as prana. Many indigenous traditions recognize a life force that supports health and balance. While these traditions use different language, they all describe the human being as more than just a physical body. These ancient healing traditions were often considered as woo-woo because there wasn't a scientific understanding of how those processes would work within the physical body. With the new understanding of quantum physics, a new description of the function of the physical world created a new language that described these ancient processes in a way that they've been misunderstood for thousands of years.
Now that we've explained the position within reality, let's delve into our bodies. We've discussed a simple difference between classical and quantum physics, but why was there a shift from one to the other? Now, this doesn't mean that classical physics was completely discarded. Rather, scientists found that classical physics couldn't explain certain observations of the atomic and subatomic scale. So quantum physics was realized to account for what classical physics could not explain. And classical physics still provides an extraordinary understanding of the natural world, the motion of planets, the behavior of falling objects, the mechanics behind bridges and engines and machines. But when investigating things like atoms and subatomic particles, things that are at a much smaller scale, classical physics couldn't explain it. In terms of our physical bodies, allopathic medicine in modern Western medicine is a science based on treating disease and symptoms using pharmacology and surgical intervention. So when we look at integrative medicine, not only uses that scope of practice, but also integrates into it other practices where allopathic medicine simply cannot reach. It goes on classical and many years of ancient healing traditions, and it takes the energy feeling, the energy medicine of the history of centuries, and is combining it with a modern facet as well. So in fact, the biggest limitation to allopathic medicine has been how do you account for the psychosomatic connections related to the host of neurological diseases that afflict the human body. So quantum physics allows for a really elegant explanation for how these afflictions manifest, and is really the only path to isolating the source of these diseases. So if quantum physics is how we explain the smaller parts of the universe that makes it whole, integrative medicine is used to explain every part of the body that also makes it whole. Those parts are the 5 bodies of consciousness, which, when put together, make us whole. These would be the physical, the vital, the mental, the supramental, and the bliss bodies. Integrative medicine uses this full scope of these bodies to identify and heal what is preventing a person from staying healthy. So there exists this field of consciousness, which in other words is our biofield, and a term that we've already touched on. This field of consciousness has many names. It's the biofield. It is known as source, the divine matrix, historically the ether. It's also the subtle energy field. It's an electromagnetic field, and it's known as the Higgs boson field. Even religious traditions call this God. Within this field of consciousness, there exist the 5 bodies of consciousness, of which we're made up of.
So looking here at this image, you can see how the bodies of consciousness make up our whole being. First is the physical body, second is the vital body, third is the mental body, fourth, supramental body, and fifth, the bliss body. So I'm going to dive a bit deeper into them individually. So first, we'll have the physical body, which is our physical matter, our organs, our tissues, cells, and our biochemical processes. Every physical representation that exists in our body is connected to each other. There are a lot of practices that can help support a healthy and resilient physical body, as in nutritious eating, exercise, strength training. Especially as we age, we lose a lot of our muscle, so this is especially important. Quality sleep is a major factor of health, especially to support the mind. There is hydration, spending time in nature, and grounding. Just like we discussed last month with Wendy, grounding can be very beneficial to neutralize negative ions within the body that were perhaps the result of EMFs from our phones or devices. The second is the vital body, which is considered as the energetic layer that supports and animates the physical body. In many traditions, this life force is known as prana, chi, or vital energy. It is nourished by the breath and associated with the biofield. The vital body is associated with vitality, resilience, and the dynamic flow of energy throughout the organism. Practices that help regulate and enhance the flow of vital energy would be breath work, mindfulness meditation, yoga, time in nature, again, and energy awareness. The third is the mental body, which encompasses our thoughts and beliefs, our perceptions, our memories, emotions, and our personalities. This is where we interpret and assign meaning to our experiences. This body plays a significant role in shaping how we respond to life's events. Like our initial question, 2 people can experience the same situation, yet interpret it completely differently because of the patterns held within the mental body. A big portion of today's presentation, perception, language, beliefs, and resilience fits within this dimension. Practices that support and enhance the mental body would be mindfulness, journaling, talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and challenging limiting beliefs. The fourth body is the supramental body, which represents a deep level of consciousness beyond analytical thought. It's described as the domain of intuition, insight, discernment, and higher awareness. It allows us to step back from automatic patterns of thinking, see the bigger picture, and make choices that align with our deeper values rather than simply reacting to our circumstances. Practices that support this intuitive awareness are, again, meditation, visualization, which can also be accomplished within meditation, self reflection, and creative problem solving. Now, there's also multiple forms of meditations where all of those can be integrated into one, but it takes a while to get to those foundations. But there's always a lot of different learning patterns towards meditation that come from a very strong foundation. And then the fifth and final body of consciousness is the bliss body. It's considered the most subtle layer of consciousness. It represents our deepest sense of peace, connection, and unity. It's described as the foundation from which the other bodies emerge and is associated with profound spiritual experiences where the usual sense of separation, time, and individuality becomes less prominent. Whether viewed spiritually or symbolically, this body reminds us that well-being isn't only about the absence of illness. It can also include meaning, purpose, connection, and inner peace. Practices that support the journey towards the bliss body are, again, meditation, practicing gratitude, forgiveness, compassion, living with purpose, and as well, time in nature.
We've just explored one holistic model that suggests we're more than simply a physical body. It proposes that our physical health, our vitality, our thoughts, our intuition, and our deeper sense of connection are all constantly interacting. But what does that look like in everyday life? One of the ways that we see this interaction is the way we experience emotions. Every one of us experiences emotions as a natural part of being human. Fear, joy, anger, sadness, love. These arise automatically in response to life. But what happens is we don't simply experience those emotions, we begin interpreting them. We often use the words emotion and feeling interchangeably. However, they're not exactly the same. Emotions is our body's immediate response to an experience. They're automatic and universal. If someone suddenly scares us, we may instantly experience fear. If we lose someone we love, we experience grief. The emotions arise before we've had a time to think about them. Feelings develop as we become consciously aware of those emotions in a split moment, in a split second, and we begin interpreting them. Our beliefs, our memories, our past experiences, our culture, the environment, all influence the meaning that we give to an emotion. So in other words, emotions are something we experience, while feelings are how we make sense of those experiences. Let's use this feeling of hurt as an example. Where does this feeling come from? Sometimes we assume the event itself causes suffering, but often what hurts most is the meaning that we assign to the event. So if you imagine two people receiving the same criticism, one person thinks I'm not good enough, while the other person thinks, so that's useful feedback. So the emotion may begin similarly, but the lasting feeling and ultimately our response can be very different. Now, this doesn't mean painful events aren't real or that we simply choose not to be hurt, but rather it highlights that our interpretation plays a powerful role in shaping our lived experience. What happens between that stage, though, between the moment of hurt and attaching a meaning, there's a moment of awareness, however small it may be, which creates the possibility of choice. Often it's consciousness reacting automatically based on old patterns and beliefs. But through practicing self-awareness, over time, we start to notice these patterns, which in time gives us opportunity to respond differently. So this would be the process of an unconscious creator, where we want to move to a point where we can be conscious creators. So when I say creator, I'm not saying control every aspect of your life, which ultimately may be possible, but it's a discussion for another time. But when we say creator, we're talking about having the capacity to influence how we interpret our experiences, how we strengthen our beliefs or change our beliefs, how we develop habits, and ultimately the actions we choose to make. So every time we pause and reflect, we give ourselves the opportunity to choose a response that aligns with our values best instead of automatically reacting.
So far, we've talked about perception, beliefs, emotions, and meaning, but we haven't discussed one of the most important parts, whereas who is interpreting all of these experiences? We understand this as the ego, not ego as in arrogance or pride, but the collection of beliefs, memories, labels, and stories that we identify with that describes who we think we are. Imagine life as a theater. Every one of us has a character to play. The character has a name, a career, successes and losses, opinions, and fears and beliefs. We spend so much time playing this character, we start to believe that we are that character. However, many traditions suggest that we are also the awareness that observes the character. Now, imagine someone walked up to you and said, "You're a giraffe." You'd probably laugh and go on about your day. The word giraffe has no significance because no part of the character believes they're a giraffe. Now, someone else walks up to you and says, "You're rude," or "You're selfish," or "You're not good enough." And you immediately feel something. Why? It's not the words itself that has that emotional impact, or that the words created some kind of belief, but they touched on something that perhaps was already there. The ego constantly protects itself. If someone threatens the created identity, it reacts, it defends, it compares, it judges, it seeks approval, it fears rejection. These reactions don't make us bad, but we become so deeply identified with our beliefs that we forget ourselves. Now, what is transcending the ego? Not necessarily getting rid of it or pretending it never was. We all need to identify with something in order to navigate our lives. Transcending the ego simply means to stop believing every thought your ego produces, to pause and reflect what it's trying to tell you. That small shift creates space, and within that space, awareness becomes possible. And with that possibility, we all allow ourselves to bring resilience and choice into actuality. If the ego is the character through which we experience life, then perception is the lens through which that character sees the world. Take this image, for example. What do you see? A pile of scrap metal, a shadow, maybe you saw the complete picture. What's fascinating is that nothing in this image changes. The pieces don't move, the light doesn't change, the object stays exactly the same. The only thing that does change is your perception. Once you see the shadows, the whole image comes together and you can no longer see it any other way. Perception isn't simply seeing, it's the interpretation. It's the lens through which we understand ourselves, other people, and the world around us. Perception shapes interpretations, beliefs, meaning, and expectations. Every event first has to be interpreted. Those interpretations gradually become beliefs. Those beliefs give meaning to future experiences, which create expectations about what we think will happen next. Over time, those expectations begin shaping how we experience reality itself. For example, there's a Buddha sitting with his students around him and he's teaching. Along the path comes a man who sees the Buddha and starts to yell at him that he's hurting these young people by filling their heads with ideas. He's taking them away from their families. They're not focusing on a job and earning money, and so on. He's saying all these random stuff. The entire time the man is speaking, the Buddha, however, never actually responds and never gives an indication that these words have actually affected him. Eventually, the man leaves. The students turn towards the Buddha and ask why he never responded or even defended himself. The Buddha says, "If you were to bring me a gift and I chose not to accept it, who does the gift actually belong to?" The student replies, "Well, I guess it would have remained with me." The Buddha says, "Exactly. This man offered me his anger. I chose not to accept it, so the anger stays with him." We can see from this example that the Buddha doesn't identify with the accusations the man was making. He understands that it is a reflection of the man's state of mind and nothing to do with the Buddha's actions. Now, I would like to switch to how that perception of life events can affect on our biology. Bruce Lipton, a cell biologist and lecturer, asks us to think about perception in a different way. He proposes that our cells don't simply respond to the outside world, they respond to the environment that surrounds them. That environment includes things like nutrition, toxins, relationships, stress. And we've seen these impacts through our live blood analysis with Randy Roscoe. But Bruce Lipton also encourages us to think about our internal environment. If two people experience the same event differently, they aren't just having different thoughts. Their bodies may also be experiencing different hormonal, neurological, and physiological responses. Now, is there scientific evidence of this? This is where epigenetics comes in. Epigenetics is the study of how environmental factors influence gene expression. It comes from the Latin prefix epi, meaning above or outside, meaning technically what surrounds the gene has an influence. Our DNA provides the blueprint, but the environmental influences like stress, nutrition, sleep, movement, and relationships can affect how genes are expressed. Whether we approach this through Bruce Lipton's perspective or through science of epigenetics, the message is similar. Our biology is dynamic and responsive. The way we experience the world matters, not because it changes our identity itself, but because it contributes to the environment in which our bodies function.
If our perceptions influence our biology and our perceptions are shaped by the meaning we assign to life, then where do those meanings come from? One of the most powerful influences is language. The words we hear, the words we speak, and most importantly, the words we repeat to ourselves. Language is about much more than communication. It gives meaning to our experiences. Every word carries interpretation. Every interpretation gradually becomes a belief. Those beliefs influence our expectations, our emotions, our behaviors, and ultimately the way we experience life. For example, if we say, I always get sick, I never have enough time, or there's something wrong with me, or I'm learning this, or I'm learning from this, I'm healing, you can change the perspective or the positivity of these thoughts. So can you feel the difference between those words? The ideas that words have power isn't unique to psychology. It's also inspired by many researchers, authors, and philosophers. They've asked themselves if intention and language might influence the world around us. Masaru Emoto is a Japanese pseudoscience, claims that positive words from beautiful ice crystals within water, while negative words cause chaotic structures. If you look at these images, on the top line, we have words like thank you, wisdom, truth, eternal, and I have loved you, angel, and peace. We also have words like you fool, evil, you make me sick. Very different energies are behind these words. And what Masaru Emoto explains is that when we speak these words to the water, the crystal formations that naturally exist within them will change. Words that emit this positive energy create these beautiful, unique structures, whereas words that emit a negative energy create these lopsided formations. Not only does language affect these water formations, but toxins, water treatment methods, and the environment also has an effect on the structure of our water. Our bodies are made up of also approximately 60% water. Whether or not words directly alter the structure of water in the way Emoto proposes, we know that language affects our emotions, our relationships, our stress responses, and our behaviors. The conversation we have with ourselves become part of the environment our bodies experience.
Before we move forward, I do also want to say how these crystal formations form. If they're in water, then also our bodies being made up of 60% water really speaks to how impactful our language is when we speak to ourselves. So if our health is determined by our words as well, then these crystal formations can change by what you're putting inside your body, but also how you're speaking to it. So
now that we've explored how our beliefs, perceptions, language, and environment shapes our experience of life, we ask the question, how do we cultivate health? How do we cultivate resilience? Earlier, we explored that 5 bodies of consciousness is a holistic framework for understanding ourselves. Another way to think about this is through 4 interconnected dimensions of health that we can nurture every day actively. These 4 are the 4 levels of optimal health. Once well-being comes from the interaction of these four levels: our physical health, our mental patterns, our emotional well-being, and our spiritual connection to meaning and purpose. When one area is out of balance, often it can influence the others. The physical level would be things like sleep, nutrition, movement. The mental are things like belief and perspective. The emotion is emotional regulation, self-awareness, relationships. And lastly, the spiritual is about our sense of purpose, of meaning, of our values. When one level is lacking, oftentimes it is felt in other areas. For example, stress or anxiety, which is felt in the mental, plays a huge role on sleep and nutrition. It can relate to sleep issues and insomnia, as well as a hindrance on the foods we consume and how our bodies will process them. Now, how do these different aspects of ourselves actually communicate? For many years, we've assumed communication flowed primarily from the brain to the body. Today, we understand the relationship is much more dynamic. The brain sends signals to the heart through efferent pathways, the nerves carrying messages from the brain to the body. But just as importantly, the heart sends information back to the brain through afferent pathways. In fact, a large portion of the nerve fibers in the vagus nerves carry information to and from the brain and the body, helping influence attention, emotional processing, and automatic regulation. One way we can observe this communication is through the heart rate variability, or HRV. HRV measures the natural variation in the time between heartbeats. Contrary to what most people would imagine, a healthy heart doesn't beat like a metronome. Greater variability is generally associated with a more adaptable nervous system and a greater capacity to respond to challenges in life. Not only does variability matter, but how organized the patterns become. This concept is coherence. And coherence is described as a state where physiological systems work together in synchronicity. Practices like slow breathing, gratitude, compassion, mindfulness have been shown to influence heart rhythm patterns and can promote a sense of calm and emotional regulation. Coherence isn't about eliminating difficult emotions. It's about creating greater harmony between our thoughts, our emotions, and our physiology. The autonomic nervous system continually helps our body respond to life itself. The sympathetic branch prepares us for action, mobilizing energy when we face a challenge. The parasympathetic branch helps us to recover and digest, repair, and restore. These systems are synergistic and are designed to shift from one to the other as needed. Now, certain biological functions are controlled by each branch, and they turn on and off when we're switching between these states. Because of modern lifestyle and society, it often forces us to live within the sympathetic mode for larger amounts of time, and we don't spend enough time within the parasympathetic mode, where we can rest and recover, and many biological processes can be affected.
We've explored why resilience matters, what shapes it, and how it's reflected throughout the body. Final question is possibly the most important. How do we cultivate resilience in our everyday lives? Everything we've discussed today can be understood through this cycle. We first have life events, then perception, beliefs, and meaning, emotions, choice of behaviors, health and well-being, and then environment. I know it seems a little daunting when first looking at it, but I want to use this image to explain that resilience isn't linear. You don't go from point A to point B and then the work is done. Resilience is constant, but when we build each part up one by one, we cultivate that resilience so that when a life event does come up, one that challenges us, we already have the building blocks so that we're able to recover a bit quicker. Think of it this way. Think of an elite athlete. We often admire how hard they train and how much effort they put into their sport. But what actually allows them to improve isn't that endless effort, but it's how they recover. Recovery is where resilience happens, and our lives work the same way. And as you work on one thing, it boosts the resilience in all other areas. So resilience isn't one big decision. It's many small choices repeated constantly. Resilience grows when we're willing to question our assumptions. Instead of asking, how do I prove I'm right? Ask, what can I learn? Or what values do we share? When we stop defending our ego, we create space for connection. So throughout today's presentation, we've explored resilience from many different perspectives. We've experienced consciousness and perception, biology, and the nervous system. But resilience isn't just something we understand, but something that we practice. Doesn't mean we never experience fear, grief, stress, or uncertainty. It means developing the ability to move through those experiences without losing ourselves. So let's talk about practical habits that build this resilience. There's healthy boundaries. So you're protecting your energy, your time, and your values by recognizing your limits and communicating them with respect. Then there's rest and recovery, where growth happens during this recovery, like the athlete. We make time to rest so our bodies and mind can restore and adapt. There's mindfulness, practicing being fully present, allowing you to respond with intention. Then there's gratitude. Regularly focusing on what is going well can shift your perspective and strengthen your emotional resilience. There's breath work, so slow, intentional breathing that helps regulate the nervous system and encourages a state of calm and balance. There are also breathwork sessions people can book with experts. But also with this regulation of the nervous system with the breath work, that's also how we move from the sympathetic nervous system towards the parasympathetic nervous system. Then there's physical movement. Movement supports both physical and mental well-being by reducing stress, improving mood, and increasing this resilience. Supportive relationships, meaningful connections, they provide encouragement and perspective and support everybody during day-to-day or lifelong life challenges. And finally, reflection. So meaningful connections provide encouragement, perspective, and support during those life's challenges. Another source of resilience is learning to look inward before constantly looking outward. Looking within isn't about blaming ourselves for difficult circumstances or putting ourselves on that kind of scale where we're upset with ourselves because we're not meeting certain deadlines or requirements, or we're not moving fast enough with this resilience. But it's more about becoming curious about our own experience. Sometimes the answers we seek aren't found by trying harder, but they're found by becoming quieter and just listening to ourselves. Because when we slow down, create space, and listen without judgment, tapping into our intuitive and listening to the inner wisdom that exists within. Intuition isn't the opposite of reason. It's another way of knowing, one that develops through self-awareness, reflection, experience, and of course, time. Sorry. Do you want to see this one?
Okay. So to conclude our presentation, what does a resilient human look like? A resilient human looks inside for clarity instead of only searching outside for solutions. They still the mind to create space for insight and intentional action. They cultivate awareness of their thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and reactions. They respond instead of reacting, creating space between stimulus and the response. They assign empowering meaning to life's experiences rather than remaining stuck in the event itself. They can practice self-compassion and self-love and recognize that setbacks occur and that that's part of our growth. They maintain healthy boundaries that protect their energy, values, and your well-being. They also accept the limitations of others and their programmed responses. They value recovery as much as effort, recognizing the rest is essential for growth, that rest is essential for growth. And a resilient human recognizes or remains open to learning, relaxing rigid beliefs, and seeks understanding over being correct. And finally, they choose growth over comfort, understanding that challenges often create opportunities for transformation. No one person lives these things every day, and there are many more ways it can be expressed, but a resilient human can look differently to every person, but looking within long enough to learn what a resilient human looks like is the most important. So at the beginning of the presentation, this question we asked, what makes people experience the same situation so differently? It's not just this one thing, it's the relationship between our biology, our beliefs, our emotions, our environment, our awareness, and the choices we make each day. The work that Suzanne and I both do allows us an opportunity to serve as a coach and to walk people through a process of opening up perception and looking things in a new way. And sometimes we struggle with relationships or we struggle with our own emotions and we don't know where some of these things come from. And the process that we can help you guide you with is in discovery and helping you to realize things about yourself, which then you decide, what do I want to do with that? How do I want to change? And what sort of things do I want to focus on? And that's really the type of work that we really do for each other. So this presentation reflects many of the principles that have inspired me throughout my studies at Quantum University. As I complete my certification as an exponential health coach, my goal is to work alongside individuals who are looking to improve their well-being by exploring the connections between mindset, lifestyle, and whole person health. My passion is helping other people strengthen relationships with others and to recognize their own potential for growth and resilience while guiding them to become the architect of their own reality.
So everything we've shared today is reflected also in the work that I do through quantum nature therapy, my own practice. My approach is centered on helping people understand the connections between their physical health, emotional well-being, mental patterns, and sense of purpose. Whether someone is looking to reduce stress, improve their overall well-being, build stronger relationships in others, navigate a life transition, or simply reconnect with themselves, my goal is to provide a supportive space where they can explore those challenges and develop practical tools for lasting change. Depending on each person's needs, that may include holistic health consultations, nutrition and lifestyle guidance, meditation practices, crystal bed therapy, or simply creating a space for meaningful conversation and self reflection. Every journey is unique, so every session is personalized. We hope today's presentation has encouraged you to think a little differently about resilience, not as the absence of struggle, but as the capacity to grow through it. Thank you for your time and your openness. We'd open the floor to discussions and questions and thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you, Suzanne and Kevin. That was great. And I put your website link down in the chat as well.
Oh, amazing.
All right, so we can unmute everyone. So if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to ask. But before that, I've heard before, actually from Abraham Hicks, that beliefs are just thoughts that you keep repeating to yourself. So there was a part of your presentation where that really resonated. Okay, let me hang on. Zoom has moved everything around. Okay, so people are welcome to unmute. I know the chat's been pretty active there as well. Oh, actually, let me stop recording first.